Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. Today's episode is our latest in the partnership with Material Handling Wholesaler for their May 2021 cover story, which is entitled Dealers at a Crossroads, Choosing the Right M&A Transaction. That is written by Nathan Perkins, who is the managing director at CSG Partners, and Nathan is going to be our guest on the show today. He's going to tell us a little bit about CSG Partners, talk to us about material handling dealers and how they've kind of fared the pandemic and how things are looking in the landscape now as we're hopefully heading out of the pandemic. And we're going to focus a little bit in on ESOPs or ESOPs, and he's going to tell us what that is, how that works, and what are some of the benefits for both the business owner and the employee as well. So, Nathan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely happy to have you on. So why don't you give us a little bit of information on CSG Partners and what it is you guys do and what you do yourself?
Yeah, so CSG Partners is a boutique investment bank based in New York. I'm actually based in Northern Virginia, about 18 miles from DC. And what we do is advise business owners, typically privately held companies, on liquidity transactions. That, when you get to the point as a business owner, you start to think about liquidity and gaining that exit from the business. A lot of questions arise typically. So, it's not something that most people like to do on their own. So we're a trusted advisor to, like I said, small to medium-sized companies. We have a specialty focus on the material handling space. So we know the space really well, and I've done a lot of transactions. We do anywhere from 20 to 25 transactions a year, so we're very active in the community. Okay. I know the space really well.
All right, great. So definitely, we're focusing in on material handling dealers in this topic and with the May 2021 cover story as well. So talk to us a little bit about, you said you do 20 to 25 deals in material handling space a year, right? So very active. So I'm sure you're very aware of what was going on with dealers throughout the pandemic. So tell us a little bit about how material handling dealers did during the pandemic. How were things for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say the answer is it depends, right? So it depends on sort of how you go to market in the material handling space. So just as an example, if you support the construction industry, let's say you're a lift truck dealer, and your path would have been very different through the pandemic in some ways than someone who's more in the logistics space who transports, goods from one place to another, for example. So, I think everyone was impacted in some way, obviously, because of things like social distancing and, managing, health in the workforce and dealing with all those issues. But financially, I think you had kind of a big bifurcation in the experience that the enterprise faced in this environment. So we had some companies that did extraordinary, had the best years of their existence in the pandemic, and some companies that really struggled to make ends meet based on their go-to-market strategy and how they where in the material handling space they sit. And obviously you also had things like supply chain issues that impacted some people more than others. And trying to get parts, trying to get equipment from overseas became a challenge. So again, I think overall, this was not the same as kind of the 2008 crisis in severity for the material handling space, but again, experienced very greatly. It was what we saw.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's been certainly been an interesting time. That's for sure.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say your comment about the pandemic ending. I hope you didn't jinx us, because man, we hope it's on the last legs for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, so you mentioned in there, it depends on, I guess the type of industry that the material handling company is serving, right? So, I'm curious on the logistics side and, warehousing distribution side, did you see that some material handling companies actually benefited from the pandemic because there was so much more demand from consumers from these e-commerce types of businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think financially there was certain sectors in the space that experienced a huge uptick in business, especially people that support e-commerce, trucking companies, anything in any way related to transporting goods or from one place to another. Obviously, that market has changed kind of overnight as a result of the pandemic, where more and more people are choosing to buy things online,
right.
And less people are willing or wanting to go to a store. And the interesting thing I think will be to see how that changes, if it reverts back to the kind of the old days pre-pandemic, or whether we see a continued interest in or higher level pre-pandemic levels of interest in online shopping and online goods. I think it's probably a mixed bag, as to how that's going to play out. But I think that some of those trends are probably set in stone, where you'll see continued demand at a heightened level for e-commerce related products.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's interesting to see how that kind of played out, and I think how it continues to play out as well, and where not only some companies excelled actually, but some companies really kind of took a step back and innovated in a lot of ways too, to kind of keep up and meet that demand. So I'm curious, as we, I guess we're knocking on wood right now, making sure we're coming out of the pandemic. I don't want you to put it out there that I jinxed it. You already did that. So.
Right.
So hopefully we're coming out of this thing, and things are starting to get back to, I guess, whatever the definition of normal will be going forward. But, how are things looking for these material handling dealers coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, again, varied experience, right? So if you were one of the people that benefited from the pandemic, I don't think you're going to see a kind of a dramatic, drop off in business. I think that, there's still going to be a kind of a more cautious than usual nature, even post pandemic, for the, kind of consumer behavior. But I also think in the sectors that were negatively impacted, like let's say you were in the construction space and your job sites were shut down for, extended period of time. I think there's pent up demand as well, where, and you also have to look at kind of the environment from a legislative perspective, where we're working currently on passing a infrastructure bill, right? So if you're one of those guys or girls that was impacted negatively because your construction projects were shut down, or you weren't able to deliver construction related equipment because of slowdowns or shutdowns, whatever it may be, I think there's a lot of pent up demand. Those projects will restart and eventually get done, and I think you'll see a lot of new projects that are going to be lighting up in the next 6 to 12 months that will be great for business for the material handling space.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of it. But I mean, you have a really good point there about how some spaces that suffered will probably be seeing a resurgence, and maybe even like a higher demand, even because things and projects and things of that nature were put on hold and delayed because of those things. So now we're talking about in the cover story that you wrote here for Material Handling Wholesaler, we're talking about dealers that are at a crossroads and talking about choosing the right merger and acquisition transaction for them to go through. And you break down a couple options in the article itself, but tell us, I guess, why some dealers are at a crossroads to begin with.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, so I think first of all, it comes down to the pent-up demand issue. I think you had, a relatively kind of significant pause in M&A activity related to the pandemic, especially in the material handling space, where we were trying to figure out what this meant for everyone. And I think especially those, again, that supported the construction space and, had negative impact on their earnings for last year. So I think when you run into an environment like this, where there's a crisis or a significant market disruption, there's always going to be a corresponding slowdown in M&A activity, because sellers are concerned about getting a lower multiple. I think buyers are concerned about investing it with all the uncertainty. And, if you were at that crossroads, 6, 9, 12 months ago, and you kind of paused the process, or you were thinking about it already, and then kind of the world changed. I have this conversation all the time with clients right now. We're having this conversation right now with clients where they're saying, okay, well, I'm thinking about doing this or doing something in the near term, but maybe I want to wait 6 or 12 months, and I say, well, if we'd have been having this conversation in March of 2020, right, then the world, changed dramatically. So things can change very quickly. But the reason I'm saying that is, again, I think it's a pent up demand issue where people were already thinking about liquidity strategies or, thinking about some kind of transaction, and everything got put on hold. And then now that kind of normal cycle, I think, spikes because you have the people that were already hitting that cycle, plus the people that were waiting because of the pandemic. And, you see a, kind of an unusual spike in activity as a result.
Interesting. So do you think a lot of companies are going to go with the merger and acquisition route now that we're coming out of the pandemic? Or do you think some maybe now are foreseeing that they might be able to survive and they might be able to go on their own?
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of survival from an M&A perspective at this point, at least not from the types of transactions we're looking at. I think, you've got an environment where, companies, business owners, let me take a step back. So one of the things that's also at play that I probably should have mentioned in the last question was demographics, right? So I'm sure the kind of the typical business owner in the material handling space is a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and, is from a broad perspective demographically, you see an aging population, right? So, those people are thinking about liquidity options, and there's, we always say, there's windows of opportunity from an M&A perspective, right? So it seems like, it's more frequent than it used to be, but every 6, 7, 8 years, there's an event that causes some kind of business disruption, whether it be the 2008 crisis, the financial crisis, or, most recently the pandemic. All those things lead business owners to think, I don't want to miss this next window because I'm 58, 60, 65, and I don't want to work another 10 years, right? Maybe I got 5 years left in me, but I don't have 10 years left in me. So maybe this is my window where I can find that exit strategy or begin that exit process, because, my time as an operator of a material handling business is limited. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And I totally understand what you're saying, because I think in the supply chain space as a whole, that has been something we've kind of been dealing with the, I guess, the average age of professionals in the space, on the, customer side and the solution provider side as well, has been increasing. So it's been Interesting, and a lot of what I found is, companies are trying to determine how do they get younger individuals interested in the space. So I'm curious, actually, how do you think we can get younger individuals interested in material handling dealerships and things of that nature? Do you think that's something that's accomplishable, or do you think we're moving more towards like just manufacturers owning the dealers instead of having more independent?
That's a really good question. I think I don't have the perfect answer, but I think, the best thing that material handling companies can do is, try and groom and, promote from within. I think that works really well. Okay. If that situation is just not playing out and there's no family or no kids in the business, sometimes a transaction option that includes replacing the operator with another operator, like the private equity route, for example, or strategic route might make more sense. Sometimes selling the dealership to the manufacturer works as well, or a strategic sale. But from the standpoint of, talent recruitment, it is a challenge, I think, that a lot of companies face. And, when you're thinking about walking away from the business that you worked so hard to create and invested so much time and energy in it, finding that right successor is a major challenge that, but I do think, again, grooming people from within and trying to promote and, work on the education and development of your workforce so you can try and find that successor is really important.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it's, it's kind of a monumental effort for the industry overall to try and create this interest. And I think it's interesting because the pandemic has actually kind of put a spotlight on supply chain as well, because it's been such a critical thing. So it'll be interesting to see how the next couple of years play out, and like what will be the impact of that with the younger generations and their interest in our space. So you mentioned in there, kind of grooming employees, taking care of the employees, and kind of bringing them up. So, one thing that your company focuses on in terms of the merger and acquisition side is the ESOP. Which has to do with the employees. So why don't you tell us, first tell us, what is ESOP? What does ESOP stand for? What does it mean? What is that all about?
Yeah, so an ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. So it is at its base is a retirement plan that is the company sets up for the benefit of their employees. So conceptually, it also serves as a succession planning strategy where the owner of the company can set up this retirement plan and sell some of their stock to it, if not all of their stock, over initial transaction or multiple transactions. And what it does is typically create a new layer of benefits for the company, which impacts obviously the employee experience, right? So that's, I think, from an employee perspective, it can be very powerful. One of the biggest issues I think that a lot of these companies are facing, obviously the top talent attraction and retention is really important, but also kind of the rank and file people is also a challenge too, where you're seeing, it's hard to find that skilled work, skilled workers, and and if you can find them, you want to do everything you can to keep them, especially the the ones that really want to kind of rise to the top. So ESOP can be a very powerful tool for attracting and retaining top talent as well as kind of middle level talent of any enterprise, because it does provide typically a layer of benefits on top of the typical 401k and health and welfare type benefit plans, where the employees get equity in the company, right? So when you have people that own a stake in the company, it's very different than just a paycheck, right? A paycheck is important, but having real equity participation in the upside and growth of a company you work for, so studies have shown, makes a huge difference in morale and culture over an extended period of time. So yeah, I think from an employee perspective, it's very valuable. And the other side of it is, like I said before, the shareholder can sell stock to the ESOP, which provides an option for liquidity for their privately held stock position.
Interesting. So then on the employee side, I'm curious, when does the employee, see the benefit of their stock? Is that at a retirement or leaving the company portion, or do they get some type of yearly payment paid out? How does that work?
Yeah, it's much like a pension plan when you think of the kind of the old school defined benefit plan, where it's really a retirement benefit. It's not a short-term benefit. It's definitely set up to reward people that stick around and, ultimately stay with the company. So we like to say it's, about a 5 to 10 year time horizon before people get, meaningful benefit they can kind of touch and feel. But over that time, stock does get allocated to their accounts, and if the company performs, does grow in value. But you have things like, just like on a 401k plan, you have things like vesting, where it takes some time, to really accrue significant benefit. But it's really designed as a retirement plan, right? So when the employee retires, they can get a rollover, just like a 401k plan, from the ESOP account to an IRA, and now they've got additional funds to support their retirement income needs.
Okay, interesting. So it's definitely a benefit to the employee, and I think it also, when you talk about the business owner looking to, I guess, let go in a sense a little bit, or maybe all of their stake in the company and move on, but they've also taken all this time to build the company over their career, and they want to see it live on. Probably, it's kind of like a legacy. So I think that the employee benefit is definitely in there in terms of wanting them to continue on long term. It sounds like to really realize the gains of their stock. So I think it's good on both sides. It sounds like. So are you seeing that more and more material handling companies and dealers are moving in that direction?
Well, we've been very busy. We had a very busy year throughout the pandemic, and we're as busy as we've ever been this year. I think some of that has to do with a sense of urgency around taxation changes. Obviously the pent-up demand is coming to fruition now, but one of the nice things about ESOPs is it helps you avoid paying taxes, right? So there's an option when you sell stock to an ESOP where you can, number one, avoid paying capital gains taxes. And number two, the company gets some very substantial tax deductions as a result of having the ESOP.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're an asset-heavy business, like a dealership, and you own, you own a fleet of equipment, right? Like you're a trucking company, or you're a dealer that also has a big rental business, for example. When you go to sell your company, you oftentimes have significant tax from the standpoint of depreciation recapture. So with an ESOP, you can do a stock sale, which effectively eliminates, for the most part, eliminates the depreciation recapture tax. So oftentimes we're seeing, the financial outcome for a business owner, an ESOP versus, sale to a strategic or sale to a private equity firm, is dramatically higher from a net after tax proceeds perspective, because you don't have to pay taxes, right? So the outcome, oftentimes is much better, but not only financially, but there's also the goodwill that comes with it. As we talked about before, there's the legacy, the impact on the employees. Most other M&A options come with some downside for the employees, whether it be people lose their jobs, people are duplicative with the acquirer, or there's just a new regime that doesn't treat the employees like the previous owner did.
Right.
With an ESOP, it's actually a net gain for the employees. So what I really like about being involved in ESOP transactions is, when structured properly, it can be a win for everybody, for all the stakeholders of the company. It can be a win for the sellers, a win for the company, and also a win for the employees, which is very rare in the M&A world, where kind of everyone gets a win after a transaction is done.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like if it goes the right way, it's certainly a win all around, I think, and for the foreseeable long-term future of the company as well. It's not kind of like just a short win and then things change quickly after. So very interesting, and I think it's definitely an interesting thing. And I know that I think Dean had mentioned to me, the editor of Material Handling Wholesaler as well, that they're ESOP as well. So I think that they're very happy with that. So, is there any more advice that you want to give in terms of material handling dealers that are out there, or material handling companies, on maybe what the right direction to go in is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the best thing I could say is that information is power. Knowledge is power, right? Because, I think a lot of business owners have preconceived notions about what the right transaction might be, or, they go down a path. The typical successful business owners getting called on all the time by private equity buyers or strategic buyers or business brokers or whoever it may be. But if you don't really fully explore all your options, you have less negotiating power, right? So, even if an ESOP might not be the right choice for you, at least you know what it is, right? Or maybe private equity is not the right choice. Maybe you end up selling to the manufacturer, selling to private equity. But if you don't have those other data points, you have less bargaining power, and you're probably going to end up with less consideration because you don't have as many bargaining chips, right? So we always like to say the more information, the better. And when you're considering an M&A transaction for all or part of any business, it's understanding your options fully and fully vetting every transaction out there. I think it can really impact the outcome because listen, on the other side of the equation, there's typically an experienced buyer that does this all the time, right? And when you're an inexperienced seller, which most people are when they go into a deal like this, it's relatively easy to get taken advantage of if you don't have information on your side. So I would say having information, having a good advisor to help you evaluate the options, making sure you fully understand what you're getting into are probably the biggest things that any material handling business owner can do when they're preparing for this process.
Okay, great. Yeah. Really interesting information and advice there as well. And I mean, I agree with you 100%. Information is the key, and making sure you do your research, and obviously, talking to people like yourself who are knowledgeable on doing this in the past. Because, like you mentioned, most of the time it's an inexperienced seller because they're probably not constantly selling their business, right?
Right.
So very interesting discussion here on the ESOP and just material handling dealer industry as a whole and what the climate kind of is. So Nathan, I want to thank you for coming on the show. How can people find out more information or get in contact with you and CSG Partners?
Yeah, our website is csgpartners.com. There's a lot of great articles and information on there, and webinars and educational information. So I encourage you to take a look. And if you have any questions, you can contact us through that website, and we're happy to help any way we can.
Okay, great. And thank you for your time on the show today. If you want to read the May 2021 cover story for Material Handling Wholesaler written by Nathan, check it out at mhwmag.com. It's called Dealers at a Crossroads, Choosing the Right M&A Transaction. So Nathan, thank you once again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.